So in OPTIS, and you may have already seen this, there are 3 asset types: vehicles, obviously, equipment, and real estate. And sometimes vehicles are pretty easy, although I've learned just from doing this training and having Joni here that a shop vehicle that you use, I don't know what you would use it for.
Maintenance or supervisor vehicles are not considered rolling stock, which is the buses, vans, and sedans up there. There are the passenger transportation vehicles. So
they'd be down here?
Yes, we put shop and supervisor vehicles down in equipment because you can get grant funds to purchase them, but they're not rolling stock. So you just need to keep that distinction in your mind. Yes.
Is the and the separation of those two are they used for passengers or not?
Yes. So you might have a supervisor vehicle, could be a pickup, could be a van. If it's not to provide transportation, then it's considered equipment.
Not to provide transportation to
Passengers.
External parties,
Yes.
not
Passenger
employees.
transportation, yeah.
Is it sort of revenue versus non-revenue? I guess not.
Here's one distinction to keep in your mind. We will purchase maintenance vehicles, things to keep the fleet going. But an agency, for instance, that's has its admin offices, we don't buy your vehicle to do your agency's business. You would have to find other funds for that. So there's kind of 3 types of vehicles, 2 of which we will fund, 1 of which we will not.
Mm-hmm.
Great questions. The other thing I've learned is what constitutes real estate. And Joni's told me that if it touches the ground, basically it would be considered a real estate asset, which would include a sign, because you have to dig a hole for the concrete and the sign would be in the ground. That's considered real estate. But the sign face, if you have to replace it after a while because it's all faded, that would be considered equipment. Right?
If the total cost of your project is $5,000 or more. So as you apply for grants and stuff, you really need to think about this equipment and sign project items, because if you want to use federal funds, you are taking on, with the grant agreement, the agreement to inventory and report to us quarterly for as long as that capital asset is used in your transit service. And you would have to get permission to transfer it to other uses. So you're really taking on a lot of, paperwork and oversight and monitoring stuff from us and FTA by using your federal funds for equipment projects. It's not to say you shouldn't, you just need to think about it up front as you plan and budget for this stuff. And it may be better for you just to either find other funds or use STF or operating funds for durable equipment, which is fine to do as well. It just keeps that distinction from overburdening you with all the work it takes.
So would the real estate type sign where you're putting a sign in the ground, that's not going to be $5,000 or more, but you could group it together with
if you have
the
a shelter
and
project
okay.
and amenities and things along the route that are all going in at the same time, you would put that in as one project, and you would just line item the signs and benches and bike racks, because they're not a shelter. But all of that stuff that gets attached to the ground has to be approved by FTA in a documented categorical exclusion worksheet, which covers all the environmental, historical, watershed, all that kind of stuff has to be approved up front. Even though it's categorical exclusion, they need to ensure that it's not in a historic district or impacting the environment. And you have to fill out an extra form with your application, and that has to be approved before the grant is written. That keeps us from accidentally funding something that's never going to happen, keeps us from doing a lot more work, and simplifies it to get that up front.
Right, and I think it's always good what you say too is that, it's fine if you want to aggregate, like you're buying computers for your whole office and it's more than $5,000, but then are required to continue to really report on that, and that's kind of a burden, so maybe.
And you can't really aggregate, you know, computers and surveillance equipment and some other stuff to make it $5,000. You know, it's got to be, you're buying a computer system that consists of several monitors, several computer PCs, you know, maybe a server or two, maybe some printers. So it's that system of computer equipment that you're purchasing. But remember, when you do that, you are taking on all that reporting and asset management requirement with it. So you may not want to, if you have a smaller agency with maybe 3 or 4 computers, you might just want to buy them one at a time as durable equipment, and then your replacement wouldn't be all at the same time either. Just depends on what works best for your agency and how you budget and replace things.
Okay, so any questions about the types of assets? There's a lot to it, and Joni's a good resource. So you'll see, this is just a little bit confusing, in OPTIS you'll see commodity numbers in the asset register for all 3 of the types of assets. And that's different than the ALI codes that I was talking about earlier, even though they sort of look the same, and it's, the only reason I'm pointing it out is that they both exist in the system and they're not synonymous. So commodity numbers would only show up on the asset register, I believe. Right, next to the, is that right, Jenny? And then the ALI codes show up in your grant agreement details and payments and that type of thing. I'm not sure what the thinking was behind this numbering, but I guess we had to have a numbering scheme, and it's similar to that, but they're not the same. And I thought they were for a long time, so hence this slide. So then we go to the asset register. This is just a sample, and I blurred out the details because I guess it was a real one. So when you look at the asset register in OPTIS, it separates out the 3 different types, and you'll notice that the equipment assets start with the letter E, real estate starts with S, shelters, I guess you could think of it, and vehicle assets start with a V. So when you want to view your assets in OPTIS, you go to Asset Search. If you want to, you can refine your search by choosing which type of asset. The best one, I think, and Jenny and Joni can correct me, to search for is the owner of the vehicle. And then so you would, across from owner, you would click on the find right here, and it would open up a screen where you could search for, I think that's my next slide.
Now, sometimes the owner will be different than the operator, and that's where, for instance, STF agency or a county takes on the grants, and then they lease vehicles to nonprofits in the area. So, for instance, Josephine County might be the owner, and the operator might be several different nonprofits. So if you click on and request owner, and you get it mixed up, and you're trying to find the nonprofit, you're better off going to the operator level.
And we have printed out some asset reports from the system that are more accurate and more detailed, I think, and we'll pass those out in a few minutes so you can double check. Sometimes the search feature in OPTIS doesn't give you the true picture if you're not super careful on what you're telling it to do here. So we kind of recognize that, and so we've run some reports. You can also choose the asset status, the record status. So I believe that would be if Jenny is still entering, like you just purchased a vehicle and hasn't completed the entry of that asset, it would be in draft stage. Is that true, Jenny?
Yes. Okay.
So then
I never go off the default of all when I look in there. I never have occasion to look for it as a draft status because the number of assets any organization has is limited.
That's true. Okay. So then if you were searching by owner, say, and you click the find button, then it brings this screen up where you would key in the first few letters of the agency name, hit submit, and then or select the agency, and it shows your choices. And this screen just shows that if your agency or a sub-agency doesn't have any assets, it is not underlined. only the agencies that actually own assets in the system would be are underlined, and that's what you'd select. So then you select that one and hit submit, and it populates this screen. And then you can do more details if you want. Choose summary or detail and click submit again. So this is the summary screen, and that's kind of like what I showed you before. There's not a lot of detail here, but if you have lots and lots of assets, it's good to condense it without the detail. Or you can show the more detailed screen that shows a few more things. So like I was saying, there's equipment with an E, shelters, vehicles, and that's the OPTIS generated asset number, and you can always search by that number. Then there's the revision history. This column here just shows that this particular asset, after it was entered probably by Joni and completed, an error was found and she had to reopen that particular asset and fix something. And so it would show as a version 1. So the first version has no number, and basically the amended version shows the version number 1. And then it has it for equipment. It will have the tag number, which is the inventory control number probably assigned by you. It would have a serial number, which is usually assigned by the manufacturer. Obviously, it has us as the issued by agency because we issued this document in the system, and McGregor's Garden is the owner. There is no operator. It has the step and the status over on this side. So we'll talk about the status first. This particular vehicle is in active status. Equipment, I don't know what it is. This piece of equipment has been disposed, and so that's the status here. The step will either be change posted, or I think it's review change, is that right? So if Jenny had opened this up and was working on it, it would show review change here, meaning it's not a complete document yet, she's still working on it. And the reason you need to know that is if you go to do your quarterly report and you see your list of vehicles, it only shows the ones that are in change posted status, and you would not be able to report on that vehicle because somebody's working on that particular asset. So if that happens, if you go to do your quarterly report and you don't see all your vehicles, it might be a good idea to do an asset search, and you'll probably find the vehicle or the asset, whatever it is that's missing, will have review changed as the status. Too bad it doesn't just say done or not done, but anyway.
It's Canadian.
It's Canadian, that's right. We'll blame it on them. So that's what that is. And then it's kind of the same thing for real estate. You have your OPTIS asset number. You have your district lot number, which is the deed or parcel number or property ID number, usually found on the county assessor's document. And then the legal ID for real estate, these are just fictitious, is the tax assessment number or lot number, also found on the covenant document. And then vehicles are the easy one because you have your OPTIS asset number and then a plate number and a VIN number. And this is one of the reasons why assets are so time consuming, is there's so many of these details that have to be looked up and entered and whatnot.
And if you ever get to wondering, because your vehicle titles have 2 VIN numbers, it's the chassis VIN that you would go by. That's the one that never changes. You might replace an engine, for instance, or the body or body parts, but the chassis VIN is the one that always stays the same.
And that's important to know for sure. Okay, so that's the OPTIS asset register. And then you'll notice when you actually open up an individual asset. So if you went and clicked on one of these, see that's underlined, so that's a link. You click on this and open up that particular asset document. You see something like this, and it has all the information. This particular one, I can tell down here in comments, it says original load from Excel file. So this is one I talked about at the very beginning of getting the assets in, we just took Joni's spreadsheet and somehow, I didn't do it, but got it in the system. So it's missing some of the things that you might see if Joni had, or Jenny had entered it herself, like the model number, original value, the original odometer. A lot of that we didn't necessarily collect that information at the time.
And the installed date, we just made it the January 1st of whatever year of vehicle it was, so we know that that's not true, but we had to put something in.
Right. And there is a comments field, so you may see things where, you know, this vehicle was transferred to some other agency, or, you know, because we can keep that indefinitely. It also doesn't have the file number, the central file or the agreement number that this particular vehicle was purchased under or through.
Well, not there, but with the load, what we did was, that's the federal grant, and
Oh, right here.
in some of them we do have the grant number, but now when it's updated and put into OPTIS, it comes from there. But you'll see the program is 5311, that's the fund info that would be populated in a current vehicle.
And so it does have the original mileage of 24, I guess,
Yeah.
right here. It's just not up here.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of the older ones, and then the newer ones show there's a lot more information and it's a little clearer. So all these things have been put in here.
And one of my favorite things about this is that you can see your last report that you reported on this vehicle, the very bottom line. And so you can see the mileage that you last reported and the date of the reading. So if you're picking something up from what somebody else did last quarter, you can see what was reported to us, because you cannot have the odometer reading be less than it was last reported. Vehicles don't drive backwards.
Well, they do, but it just doesn't.
But it doesn't count miles,
Yeah.
so you can't go backwards on your mileage.
Right. Is there anything else, Jenny, that you would like to add about any of this, or not really?
Probably not largely, not about that sheet itself.
Okay. So there's a lot of good information in there, and hopefully it's accurate. But if you see anything that isn't, then contact Jenny. So we get this question sometimes. When you're in there, you don't see what you thought you would see. One of the reasons is the status, like I talked about, is review change. So you've gone to do your quarterly report and you don't see one of your vehicles. This could be the reason. So you would see the vehicle or the asset in the asset register, but it's not pulling to the agency periodic report, the quarterly report, because it's not complete. And so then again, we have to work with Jenny to find out what's going on with that. Sometimes it's just a data entry error. And Joni kind of touched on this. Depending on, like, you may think that the vehicle is owned by your sub-agency, but really it's owned by you. And so when you do a search, depending on if you use search by organization, hierarchy, whatever, it might not appear. So that's why the reports that we're going to hand out in a second are really helpful, because it shows owner, operator, and you can get that cleaned up. And we've found, just by virtue of having OPTIS and having people going in and looking at this, lots of errors. I mean, not a lot, but I mean, we've cleaned it up so that it's more reflective of reality, I guess.
And when we first did the data dump into OPTIS, if an agency wasn't a current grant recipient, we could not associate the vehicle to them as an operator, so we had to leave it at the STF agency level. So as that's corrected, we've gone back in and added those agencies that have to report just on vehicles. So if you see something that you think might be generated from that problem that we had when OPTIS was first initiated, let Jenny and I know, and we'll investigate it and get it corrected for you.
And it's great because we have the titles right at our office, and so we can go and see exactly what it, although we're scanning them in here too, so I'll have to show you that. And this is kind of the same thing. And then Joni come. Yes. Somebody have a question? What's that?
I'm looking at Asset Maven and then Capital.
Oh.
Maven.
Yeah.
She's jumping
You're
ahead.
jumping ahead. Sometimes we release titles on vehicles that were still in use. Not sure why. Like I said, Joni can explain that. And so those, and this is pretty much all cleaned up now, I think, but sometimes you won't see the vehicle because we're no longer the title holder. But I don't know if I explained that very well.
In the past, we had different management styles and different thoughts about when we released our interest in a vehicle, and we changed. When Michael came on, he said, why are we turning these titles back? So we, released all the titles if they were, had met the useful life by age, but they were still being used, and we still needed to have a say in what happened with them, because we had, we even have to get permission from FTA on some vehicles, if they're still being used. So anyway, it just didn't make sense to release the titles, and now we don't do that anymore, but the vehicles whose titles were released are not showing up for you to report on. So I've been telling people, if you're going to replace them or take them out of service in the next couple of years, don't bother having us put them back in. But we can, if you do have some that you want to keep reporting on, because it makes sense for you, we will put them back in and we will show you as the title holder. We won't take the titles back, but because that costs you money or us money, but we would enter them because they were federally funded.
So I think this is the last slide. So for errors or questions on the OPTIS asset register, the OPTIS asset maven, Denny Erickson, and then capital program questions is Joni, and she's the queen. She has a crown. I'm not sure what a maven wears that indicates she's a maven, but
I think I wear a crown of flowers.
crown of flowers. I like it. So these are the 3 assets that Charlotte's Web Transit has. And if I open, I want to make sure I open the right one. This one here.
Right.
So I'm just clicking on the underlined number. Here's that screen that has all the details. And then if you go to maintain, attachments, you can see, let's try it this way. And this is a real title, so pretend you didn't see it. So there's the actual title that's been scanned in. And we've done that for everybody, huh?
Well,
Pretty much?
no, but if it's a recent vehicle, last year and a half, then it should be there. And then as we edit them, when we can, we add them in, so.
I thought we were scanning them in black and white so that.
We are now.
Okay.
Because that's true, you could print that.
But it's illegal to copy titles because they are a financial document.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Look at this, this is actually. That's it.
So since people are holding these reports, I want to tell you a little bit about what you're holding. The ones on legal are, when I run an asset report for your agency, I can run it as a PDF or in Excel. So often I'll do it in Excel so I can manipulate it a little bit for you. So that's what I ran in Excel, and it includes hierarchy, but I probably took out some hierarchy that I thought might be superfluous since we were talking about the vehicles you own and operate. The ones on the letter side are just a straight hierarchy report. So it's more like what it would look like if I just dumped it from OPTIS and didn't do anything to edit it for you to try to make it clearer. In both cases, I've done some highlighting on the ones that are disposed, because a lot of times people will say, hey, we don't have this vehicle anymore. So if it says disposed, that means it's not something you have to report on anymore. And you may find errors as you look through your inventory, and we can talk about those as we go on in the future. The other reminder is when you look in train, the statuses of things will probably be different because the data is not current. So as you practice, it'll look different, but what I gave you was what's from the live system.
I don't know how this was done.
So did everybody hear that? Do you have any questions about what you're looking at? I'm just opening one of the reports that. This is Sunset Empires.
Thank you. So handy.
So,
Does that help?
so for the disposed, even though they still show up there forever, but you just don't report on them? Is that, okay.
Yeah, they stay a part of the asset register, but they just the reporting requirement stops.
Because we have a lot to be disposed of in the last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I just need to make sure that we report on the right amount, the right ones.
So we've run these, and it was just yesterday or the day before, so these are current, out of production. Anytime you want us to run another one, just let us know. Jenny, I think you can run them.
I can run them, yeah, I do that all the
I
time.
can do it, Ivan can do it.
So, Jay, if you are getting through the process and you've released vehicles and we gave you the title and you got them shunted off to another agency and you're seeing them as active here, you need to email Jenny or I and we can change the status for you so that you don't have to report on them anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna go check on all these.
And one thing we might do is if you transfer them to another transit agency who is still using them in active service, what we would do is change the association from Sunset to whoever took on the vehicle, so it would no longer be active for you, but it would be active for whoever you transferred it to.
So ours would say disposed for us, or it just inactive?
No, it would not show on your report anymore because it's
It wouldn't be on this at
associated.
all.
It would move to whoever took the vehicle on.
So for instance, when we just, the hybrid bus
Yes.
is not on here anymore at all?
Right, because it went to the other agency, and so we showed that with the title change and everything.
Okay.
So it went to that agency that took it.
Now, and I believe we got the titles from you already of some old scrap buses that were sitting in our yard. We just disposed of those.
Mhm.
Do we need to put that on here, or since we already have the titles from you?
You
they're
would,
already been
you would
disposed?
report in your next report, you would change it to out of service and the disposal date, on the bottom of your agency periodic report. When you report on your vehicles, you would change the status there, and then that would trigger us to change it in OPTIS. Or
Are you seeing those old ones here?
I don't know which ones they were.
Okay.
I just know that operations manager said he just disposed of a couple.
Oh.
That we had already planned on doing that, but they finally went off the lot just a few weeks ago, and so I don't know if they're already in here yet or not.
If we've released the title, the status should already be set to dispose.
Oh, really?
But
Okay.
you can still, if you have data you want to still report just to say what happened, you can always put that in the optional agency narrative on your periodic report, which we'll talk more about tomorrow.
Yeah, it might be one of these old ones here that already say disposed.
Yeah.
Might be one of these, but I'll check. Thanks.
You bet.
So Joni's here for a few more minutes. If you have other asset questions, capital type questions, anything you would like to ask her, even about capital grant agreements or what the future looks like, or
I have a quick question, Jenny. We have some vehicles that we got directly from the FTA and the FTA funded. I see that 2 of them are listed on here, but I just purchased another one. Do you want them listed on here? If they were purchased by the FTA, just so you know what's sitting in
So
our
you got
inventory?
5309 funds or something? They
Directly.
should not have been titled with us on the title, so that was an error.
Okay.
So if you titled them incorrectly.
Well, I have no idea who, well,
If we
if
are.
I
on
did
the-
it, it was
If
done.
we were on the title and we
Incorrectly.
shouldn't have been because you didn't have a grant agreement with us, then, we'll have to investigate it, but you need to give us the year, make, model, and VIN number so that we can pull up all of our information on that vehicle. And
Okay,
if,
yeah, it was done far enough back. I went to look to see if there's not a title scanned in or anything there, like 2008.
but we can pull all that information and investigate what happened. We tried to clear that out as much as we could before we went to OPTIS, but never got
Okay.
figured out.
one thing some other people have suggested is, I don't have it up anymore, but when you have the Excel spreadsheet up, that's a live Excel spreadsheet that we could email to you. And some people like to take that and then modify it and put their own numbers in that they manage their fleet by, or even non-PTD, so you can have it all in one piece. If that's helpful or not, you can use that as, so let us know if you want us to send you Excel you can manipulate on your own.
Super easy.
But eventually you'll be able to have all that in OPTIS. It's just not happening now. So, and it does help to have a cross-reference that, here's you can put the OPTIS number, or even take your own spreadsheet and just put the OPTIS number in, so then you can cross-reference, whatever works. Anything else about capital or assets? Okay, thank you so much, Joni.
You're done.
Yes. I don't have to